Continuing with our program is an important discussion on Allyship 2.0. Please welcome Yamila H. Harris, Global Head of Support and User Experience for Munich Re, and Souheil Badran, Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer for Northwestern Mutual.
Hello, everyone. I have to tell you, I am incredibly excited to be here with everyone today, and in particular, to be joined by Northwestern Mutual's Executive Vice President and COO, Souheil Badran. This is a topic that is particularly near and dear to my heart. And we're going to be taking a deeper look at allyship and championing women in the workplace and why it's so paramount. And the most exciting part is obviously we're going to be hearing straight from Souheil. This is something that he is a strong advocate for and an active champion. So we're going to hear a little bit more about his personal journey. We're going to walk away with some actionable steps that we can take to be allies. And even better, I think we're going to have some fun along the way here, right? Just we segued from that great music on hold, and we're going to keep that party going in this fireside chat. So, Souheil, first, hi, welcome.
It is so good to see you, although it's in a box, on Zoom or Google, but it's great to be with you, Yamila, and thanks for the conversation that's about to happen, and thank you for the high-tech team for the invite. This is truly an honor to be here with all of you.
So, we keep hearing this word allyship, and I think before we really dig in deeper, it would probably be really good for our audience to get a little better understanding of what we mean when we say allyship. Souheil, is that something that you can maybe help our audience out with and give us your definition for allyship?
Yeah, absolutely. So think of allyship. A great question. I think it really sets the kind of the groundwork of what we're about to talk about. And really, for me, allyship is basically any person or individual, really, one of us, who is able to empower or stand up for another person or group of people, right? Somebody who may look like us, somebody who may not look like us, but anybody who's really got the ability to really stand up and empower a different person or group of people. And the reality is, Yamila, anybody has the potential to be an ally, because allies really play a powerful role in advancing kind of our unrivaled culture of respect and inclusive culture. And if you're working for a company and you want to represent the community around you, you have effectively to become an ally. And if I may, let me just continue maybe a little bit more, because I think sometimes what happens is there is a difference between what people think of ally versus a sponsor. And one thing I want to say too is, again, it's a title that bestowed upon you based on your actions. Like, I never put on a business card, hey, please put my title as an ally, right? Really, you've got to earn it. And that's something that happens over time. So think of it as a verb. It's probably hardest and most uncomfortable. It's not passive or static. It never ends. You have to continue driving it. And you have to use your access, your strength, your position, your resources to continue supporting others. And everybody can help in one way or another.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. I really appreciate it. I think that helps to set the stage. But now you've piqued my curiosity, and I just want to know a little bit more about your background and how it's kind of connected now into allyship, and what led you to this allyship journey that you're on now.
It's funny. My parents both worked hard. I grew up in Lebanon and came to the States in 1985. And I'm the proud father of three girls. My youngest is 22. My oldest will be 27. No, none of them are married yet. So, more to come on that. I may need some allies at that point when they make the announcement. But the reality is I'm also an immigrant to the United States, right? And my career has taken me across a variety of industries. I've lived in 6 different countries. And I'm really grateful for where I am professionally, personally. So if I draw on my, I'm going to call it my immigrant experience, people once asked me, they said, Souheil is a hard name. How about would you change it to something like a Sam to gain an edge when you're interviewing for jobs or when you're going into meetings? And I have to admit, Yamila, for a minute, I thought, well, that's an interesting proposition. But really, I decided to stay resolute and stay true to who I am and encouraging others to do the same. So,
I love that. Yeah, I've had
uh,
a
yeah,
similar. Again, Yamila is not the most
that's
common
right.
name either. It has been butchered many a time, and kind of a similar circumstance where someone said to me, "Why don't you just change your name to something like Alice?" Like, well, that doesn't even have any type of
Right.
uh, correlation. But yeah, it's something that not only am I proud of the name, I use it as a differentiator, which I think you do as well. And I think the other piece is it gives us an opportunity to share a little bit more about our heritage and our history as we're explaining the name and getting folks to become more comfortable with it.
I very much agree. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, very good. So if you can, yeah, tell me a little bit more about like the career journey, because again, you had the immigrant journey. Um, how did you get to, COO of Northwestern Mutual, and you know, what are the things that have kind of propelled you along the way to be an ally?
Um, so let me maybe, Yamila, start by giving you just a little bit of background on Northwestern Mutual. It's probably a name that many of you are familiar with, but we're a 165-year-old company, really with a singular vision to deliver financial security so our clients can be free of anxiety and around and live the life that they decide that they want to choose. So as we think about financial service and the industry, we think of it as for the many, not the few.
Hmm.
And so, over 4.5 million clients across the United States. We are national, not international. But as a company, we've really been trying to transform how people experience financial security.
Yeah.
And, when you think about digital transformation, it takes center stage, and people think of it only as is it a technology play or a services play? But we also decided to add the human touch to it and the human aspect of it. And this is kind of where the allyship and the journey came in. So
Hmm.
my career, I started out as a programmer. I came to the United States in 1985, worked as a developer, went to school for my computer degree. Later on in life, got my MBA. And throughout my career, it's always been finance, financial technology, fintech, larger organizations, international organizations. What led me here is years of experience. And when I looked at what Northwestern Mutual was trying to do, Yamila, it really was going through a transformation. And I thought, what better place for me to really join and help with that transformation? And I
Yeah.
say that with the caveat that it wasn't just about, oh, it's a technology transformation. What I truly believed in is the culture of the organization
Yeah.
and the culture of diversity. And I really want to give kudos to our CEO, John Schlifsky, because we all know what happened 2020, 2021. A lot of issues in our communities around diversity and inclusion. When I look back at what John had done, our journey started probably 10, 11 years ago when he took over as CEO. And he's really built a team around him to really drive that journey forward. So now, if you look at our board of directors, it's extremely diverse, right? Our environment within the company is very diverse. And that's really what I'm the most proud of.
Yeah, and I think that's phenomenal. I think it's probably the most um underestimated part of I think change and transformation in general is really that organizational and cultural piece of it. And I think oftentimes it's neglected.
That's right.
And this is this is my passion, is really around the organizational change management and those components of it around user experience. So completely understand and love what Northwestern Mutual is doing. I want to dig in a little bit more, but before I do, I want to turn it over to our attendees and pose a question to them as well. I told you we would have a little bit of fun along the way. I want to make sure that we're staying interactive and engaged here. So I believe that behind the scenes here, the magic is happening, and there should be a poll that will be appearing momentarily. And we'd love to get some insight from all of you. So what we want to know is where all of you are in your personal allyship journey. So today, thinking about current state, where do you feel you are today? And you're going to have a couple of options there, and I'm looking forward to seeing where that turns out. But while we're waiting for that to come back, Souheil, okay, we've talked a little bit about um, coming into the into the States, your career journey. Obviously your personal journey has had a lot to do with allyship as well, with your three girls, or women we should say at this point.
They are.
So what are some of those other like aha moments that you had, right? Like that really kind of cemented, wow, I need to be a champion for allyship, or in particular, are there aspects of allyship that you're more drawn to?
It's funny. I thought about that question, um, and I think the kind of roundabout answer is I don't know if I ever necessarily read a book that says, "Oh my gosh, I've been missing something," right? I truly, and again, we're all different, right? But for whatever reason, um, I look back and thought, okay, where did that really start? And I think it became ingrained in me because I looked at my dad had his own business. My
Mm.
mom, when I was younger, actually, we lived in Kuwait, and she was one of the first females to work at the airport in Kuwait Airlines at the time. And I remember, like, it's always like looking at old pictures. You see the single female and a bunch of men around. So to me, it was like, okay, how can I continue to support that, right? And fast forward, I've always grown diverse teams. I've always looked at how can I encourage and sponsor people, and I looked at them as individuals versus, you know what, I have 10 people reporting to me. I've got to make sure that 5 of them are female or 5 of them are people of color. I never really took that approach. We always looked at the best candidates.
Organic, yeah.
Or it's very organic, right? But more importantly, and this is something I've done it before, we actually are kind of doubling down on it now. You have to start thinking about that succession planning, right? To say, okay, if I leave someday, and who are the right people behind me? And that's really, you've got to bring people from within. So we look at the rising stars in our organization to say, here are the individuals that if we give them stretch assignments and we can sponsor them, not just mentor them, and we have a opportunity to continue driving that talent. But going back to your question, before joining Northwestern Mutual, I was the president of Alipay, which is a Chinese company, part of the Alibaba group that was founded by Jack Ma, very familiar name.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember being in China, and that was truly my aha moment in 2016 when I had the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar organization. I was working for the largest privately held company in the world. We were valued at $150 billion. And I remember Jack, with all the success and knowing his story, getting on stage in front of the whole crowd with the whole leadership team, over 300 people out of 50 plus thousand, saying, this company will not succeed without women. This company cannot run on engineers alone. You have to drive that diversity, and you have to bring that diversity of thought and leadership and empathy. And you have to make sure that you're hiring people that can complement your skill set. And that really, Yamila, was kind of that point that says, wow, it kind of resonated with me that everything that I truly believed in was something that Jack basically just articulated on stage, and I've been able to carry that with me along the way.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I love, again, when we talk about that organic definition of a team and looking at diversity from every perspective, you know, I think that's so incredibly important, because I think that the piece that sometimes leaders and even companies misinterpreted, or the challenge that they encounter, is you want to do it in a way where you're not creating a stigma
Right.
against, any particular diverse group either. And the moment that you look at it from a perspective that is, I'm trying to tick a box, I think you start to get into these conversations that become very difficult, right? Because the idea is to really promote the differences in a way that people understand it, that it's about the collective. And it's about not just saying, I have 5 women for the sake of
Mhm.
I have 5 women, but then putting them in a box and putting them into a standard that took away any of those uh, attributes that make them different.
We have what we call our Women's Field Association. So the way that Northwestern Mutual goes to market is through our field and financial advisors. And a couple of years ago, we actually established the Women's Field Organization. And I remember the president of the Field Association, I was meeting with her, and she said, I'm so glad that we're looked at not as a checkbox, but as somebody that can influence the where we're going, how we're going, and being a voice around the table to
Perfect.
influence where we're going, right? And that to me has resonated.
That seat at the table is so incredibly important.
Absolutely.
But we've got some poll results.
Let's
So
hear
I,
them.
I
Yeah.
thought I'd share what we have here. So we have about 27% of our attendees here have said that they're just beginning and they're curious to learn more about being an ally. We got 50, almost 52% that are middle of the road, so they consider themselves an ally, but they could probably do more. And we've got about 21% that say that they are ally aces.
I love it.
I'm a supportive ally who actively advocates for others. So I think that that's phenomenal. And look, allyship is a journey, as Souheil mentioned. It's something that we can always do more. There's not going to be a stopping point, and that ability, as high tech would put it, that that zeal and that passion to push up and pull up others is something that we should carry with us at every step of our journey and career. Whether you are just starting in your career, whether you've retired, there is always an opportunity to push up and pull up. And we have an audience. We have an audience comment. So I thought I'd share that with you, Souheil, and get your take on it.
Right.
Allyship is a journey. Is a journey we're all in, working to move from being an ally to one, to an ally to some, to an ally to all.
That is a fantastic comment. That is absolutely it. And I think whoever wrote it, this was not planted, but thank you. No, it really is. I mean, I think the maybe the 3 or 4 words that I want to focus on, you have to start somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to start with an ally to one. You're not going to get it right. And so, it's if I wake up one day and I decide to run a half marathon, number one, you don't want to see me run. So that we'll skip that part. But it has to start with training. Now, some of you may have that capacity and physical ability to do it right away, right, without any training. But you have to start somewhere. You start with a mile. You start maybe walking and running the 5K. Then you run the 5K, and then you build up to that half marathon or a marathon or a triathlon.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is you have to start somewhere, because if you try to do it all, you're going to get really sore and you're going to stop and you're going to say, this is not for me. And that, to me, the comment here, which I really appreciate, is you have to start with one. Let me maybe just expand on this a little bit. And I'm going to say this is based on the size of your organization and where you're working today.
Mm-hmm.
Our organization is about 8,000 people strong. So what we've done over the years, I've only been there 3 years. So a lot of the effort here started before my time at Northwestern Mutual, which again, I feel like I'm now a part of carrying that legacy forward and making it better. Our first employee resource group was our African American group. Then we expanded into our Asian group. Then it was our Hispanic group, which, by the way, I'm the executive sponsor of now.
Wonderful.
And you really have to start somewhere, a group of you. Sometimes people think that when you want to start an initiative, it has to be top down from the CEO. Yes, we do have an influence, but remember, we're not in the detail every single day, depending on your position in the organization. So I would encourage most of you, all of you, for example, if you don't have a resource group within your organization, start it, right? It's a women's group, it's a Hispanic group, it's an African-American group, LGBTQ plus group, right? It doesn't really matter, but if you feel passionate and it's who you are, you have to kind of take the lead and drive it forward.
Yeah, I love that, and I'm almost curious, right? What are some of those tips that you would give to individuals to take a little bit more of that top-down approach? So I know you've said start it, but are there, you know, any couple of you know, tricks or suggestions that you would give to folks in order to take that step to start things out?
Maybe let me position it as, I guess, probably if it applies, how I practice allyship at work. Would that help?
That would be fantastic. Yes,
And I'll share kind of what the most difficult part about being an ally, right?
that
Because
would be
again,
great.
it's
Yeah.
never rosy. Again, we're all different, Yamila. So I have the tendency to lead from the front. And broadly speaking, I really pride myself in leading from the front, but more importantly, leading by example. So as a leader, to me, you know, one of my good qualities that I take pride, like I'll never say, oh, I'm really good at whatever, but this is one that's kind of been in me. It's innate, I guess. Having lived in so many countries, being an immigrant, I take the time to listen, understand people's priorities, what makes them tick, what makes it work for me. For me, it's important to get to know, you know, what the teams are working on and roll up the sleeves with them. So I've always been drawn to that interaction with people, and I could not really do or be as successful in whatever I do without working with my colleagues across all the different areas. So I make to kind of take that conscious effort of understanding and balancing what we're trying to focus on, how we build a team, but also how we build a very diverse team. And I'm relentlessly networking, reviewing resumes, showing up in this industry events, talking to people, you know, backstage. We're always looking for top talent. And whether there's an opportunity now or later, that's kind of how I do it. But there are other ways to practice allyship at work. So you can look at diverse candidate slates. Many of us, especially in 2021 and coming up in 2022, we know there's a shortage in work or workers, right? However, my big advice to you, if you don't write it down, I'm usually going to give you 2 or 3 things that I want you to take away with you. Don't hire the first beating heart. What do I mean by that? Take the time to look at resumes and give yourself some breathing room to hire somebody to really assess the talent and hopefully bring in diverse talent that you can drive into the organization. Slow down to make a good decision, because the faster you go, you're going to make a quick decision you may regret later on. Advocate for capable women, people of color. Again, that's very, very important. You cannot just put it on a PowerPoint that says, yeah, you know what, we interviewed 3 or 4 candidates and 2 of them were diverse, and you know, we're good to go, we've done our homework. You have to really advocate for what you're trying to build. You have to make sure that everyone's voice is heard. Remember, we all come from different backgrounds. Your background is very different than mine. Although we're both wearing white shirts, we're very different probably. So in my leadership meetings, I'll make sure I call out those with probably who are a little bit quieter to ensure that they're not just sitting there nodding their head. They may have their best ideas in the room, but maybe they're an introvert, right? So you have to make sure that you're not just rushing your meetings. You're taking the time to listen to everyone around the table. So that's, I would call that at the team level. Now go up maybe a level higher. You have to engage your peers to be allies. So again, as the executive sponsor of the Hispanic Employee Resource Group, I work with my peers across technology, across product, across different areas, and say, look, if you're looking for technology candidates, can we go to start at high schools even that are predominantly Hispanic and encourage the students in there to take a technical track and really drive them to hopefully someday come to Northwestern Mutual. So in a nutshell, I mean, you've got to try different things, expect to make mistakes, but it's really better than sitting on the sideline, kind of wishing and hoping. You've got to take that first step and join the conversations and supportive commentary, whether it's via email, Slack. You've got to take you and do your part in that.
Yeah, and I think it's, taking steps, little bocaditos for my Hispanic contingency out there. Taking these little bites that are going to slowly make you a little bit more comfortable with stepping into the uncomfortable. And when you start challenging your way of thinking and getting engaged and moving off the sidelines, it makes such a difference. But you mentioned something which was around the quieter folks in the room and so forth, and this kind of makes me start thinking about this pandemic that we're all so familiar with, that has really turned everything upside down and changed the way that we interact with our teams, and has removed some of those elements that you would have in order to gauge certain things or certain perspective when you're physically in front of someone, right? And so you have to be even more
Intentional.
intuitive and even more intentional. So I want to dig into this a little bit more. But before we do that, I want to, wave the magic wand again and see if our, backstage team will magically get this second poll question out to our audience members. And really, this is around how how everyone feels that their allyship journey has changed during the pandemic. Okay. And I want to pose this question to you as well. In the meantime, while we're getting the results back from our audience members, so what are some of those things that you would say changed during the pandemic? Like, did it become more heightened, or do you think that some of those elements of allyship have dropped during the pandemic? What's your take?
So again, I'll talk about leading from the front, right? At
Mhm.
least in my position as an executive and as a human being, more importantly. During the pandemic, the question is depends when, right? March 13th, I was not even thinking about allyship. I was thinking about how do we get, our 7,000 people working with my peers across the organization to make sure that everybody's, number one, safe, number two, the week after, being productive. And then we said, all right, the second part two, if you will, was, all right, everybody's working from home. Many of our employees have kids at home. How do you balance what's happening between schools and the ability to conduct your work? So the second part was more focused on, are people okay, right? Are they okay mentally, not physically? Luckily, physically, everyone kind of stayed at home and stayed safe for the most part. But are they okay? The third part, and I would say I'd put that category, Yamila, probably in that June timeframe, June 2020, because I don't want to make it sound like I got it figured out in March of 2020. I'd be lying to you. I don't want to do that. In June of 2020, I kind of stepped back, and again, just chatting with some of my peers and some of my team members. When we're talking about allyship, what's missing in this virtual environment compared to the physical environment? It was exposure. How do you continue to build your brand when you're on a limited Zoom and you can only see from here to here? You don't have that full interaction, body interaction with the individual who's presenting, right? Because what we try and do is give our the people that we sponsor or we mentor the ability to really shine and develop their own brand with their organization. So we really started working on that. In June of 2020, I was mentoring 4 people. Today, I'm mentoring 12 people.
Wow.
And 10 of them are women. 2 of them are male. 1 is a person of color. Because I really thought, you know what, especially when you're mentoring somebody and you ask them the question like, what's the hardest part for you? Well, how do you speak up? And that was at the time, how do I speak up even in a meeting, let alone in a Zoom where everybody sometimes is talking over each other? So we really went through an area or a period where we're coaching and mentoring around how do you make yourself visible, speak up at the right time in a sense, and just don't lose that focus, because we want to continue building you up. We want to continue sponsoring you. And to do that, we have to find opportunities where you can shine, whether it's Zoom or now that we're back in person for the most part. We want to make sure that you don't lose a year in your career by being visible.
Yeah, and we've got some poll results that looks at. Oh wait, there's some updates coming up here. So
All
here
right.
we go. Well, I'm gonna say
That's really good.
clearly the pandemic, if it had a silver lining, it's around some of the allyship efforts here, because we see 1% of our audience response responded that their allyship efforts lessened throughout the pandemic. 31% responded that their allyship efforts stayed about the same.
Fantastic.
Now, what we don't know if stayed about the same means that they weren't doing very much, or they were doing quite a bit. And about 58% actively increased their allyship efforts throughout the pandemic. So it became something clearly more conscious.
Mhm.
And that, I think that's kind of an interesting topic, right? Because yeah, we're talking about the pandemic piece of it, but you also have the aspect of now we're starting to some extent start coming back into the office. And you know, having led global teams for a really long time, one of the things for me is, when everybody was virtual, yes, definitely there were the negatives, but one of the positives that it evened the playing field, um, to a big extent. Now you're starting to come back into the office. Many people will still work remotely. Others will be physically in the office. Some of those past behaviors where you had the water cooler conversations, or the virtual folks that were in the room were neglected or slightly ignored in a hybrid meeting. Um, what are some of the things that you're thinking about now, with maybe the social reintegration as you're bringing people back into the office?
I think for us, and believe me, if you look at our Monday morning meetings at the senior leadership team level, 10 of us that report to the CEO, we talk about it, and one of them is how do you establish a new norms for flexibility?
Mm-hmm.
We all know now, especially again in the last couple of years of being on all the time or working from home, you have to allow for that flexibility that can help your team members, especially women who may be shouldering increased demands at home, and that you have to help them build a life balance between work and family that is sustainable, that they're not going to get burnt out. Because what we saw during the pandemic, I can't remember where the stat came from. I don't want to say McKinsey, but one of the big consulting firms showed that most of the people that actually left the workplace were women.
Yeah, and you read my mind, because I was going to reference that same point as well, because you actually started to see a drop off.
Which it goes against everything that we're trying to do, which is again creating that balance between kind of at NM right now we're about 50-50, which is fantastic. So you wake up one day and you realize you're dropping, and what can you do to control it? So you have to create that environment for flexibility. You have to kind of foster that environment that says, okay, here are the office hours that work best for me. You have to give them the freedom to disconnect where possible. But you can't just say, well, no, Yamila, go ahead. You can disconnect and just log in or do your work whenever you feel comfortable. And behind the scenes, you're being stigmatized, right? You really have to put the power of your words and your actions together and really fulfill what you're talking about. You cannot play games with anybody. So we have to model the flexibility. And really at our company, we're really, do we have it right? I would say no. But are we really headed in the right direction? And more importantly, intently listening to what we're hearing from employees. I think that's really what we're very proud of.
Okay, so I want to just share an audience comment with you. And then I'm conscious that we probably have about 15 minutes or so left. I want to leave time for the audience to ask us questions also, but I also want to pose one more question to the audience as well.
Yeah.
So before I go to the audience comment, I'm going to turn the tables over back to our audience members as well, and pose, I think, one last open question here, which is, um, what is one thing, so think about, one thing that you're going to start doing in order to continue your allyship journey, and just kind of share that, and you can just respond in the chat, and we'll go ahead and start to capture those responses out of the chat. In the meantime, one of our audience members have commented that allyship can be very powerful when it's authentic,
Mhm.
and when it's not just something to check off of a to-do list, or to follow a leadership trend. And I think you and I couldn't agree more
That's right.
on that front. So thank you to the audience member that shared that. Absolutely spot on. And that authenticity measure is incredibly important. This goes back to a comment I made previously, which is around, um, again, when we talk about diversity or we talk about allyship, but then we put it into the framework, or into the box of what we consider norms,
Mhm.
uh, you've just taken away that authentic measure of diversity, and the value of diversity, which allows for innovation and for challenging of perspectives.
That's right.
Yep.
That's right.
So Suhail, obviously you're already doing quite a bit around allyship, but we're going to ask you the question as well, right? If there's one more thing that you're going to start doing as part of your allyship journey, what would that be?
Uh, I think I would, same as anything, you want to try and take it up a level, right? So what I mean by that is, I'm going to continue to look at least for what are some of the big win-wins that we can do as an organization and as a leader. So if we think about strategies that empower women as leaders, drive business results, we can generate returns for our organization, right? And for women and the world for that matter. So you have to work and listen to some of the insights that are coming in from our employees as well. So as a leader in the financial services, I'm going to give you a stat. The majority of personal wealth in America, 51%, is now controlled by women, right? And according to McKinsey, this one I can attest to, by 2028, women will control about 75% of global discretionary spending, right? So take that now back to work, and what I would do better. I would say continue to create safe spaces to build a dialogue for women and men, or people of color. You need to articulate what they need to succeed, but really more conversations are needed. In general, men should support more women. You've got to make your positive beliefs known among the women and men. Again, ties back to the comment. This is not a checkbox. If you think of this as an exercise or something to satisfy my boss, my boss or the shareholders, you're off on the wrong track completely. So you have to get involved. You have to show up. You have to get involved in activities led by women, led employee resource groups. You have to lead as an example, and people, you have to be visible.
Yeah.
So I would say, Yamila, it's really continue to make that unwavering commitment to change. Practice it every day. People are going to notice, whether you like it or not. People are going to notice your behavior, and hopefully that's going to continue to drive positive change.
Perfect. And I think that kind of ties into the type of advice that you would give to our audience members as well, which I think is phenomenal. So I'm going to read a couple of the comments that we've gotten back so far. So we've got, the balance was a struggle at first while our children were being educated from home for a year while still working. And so again, I think that's probably still a challenge
That's right.
for many parents out there today. And even with children going back into schools in certain locations, it's really finding the that reintegration and that balance of work and so forth. Okay, so let's see here. So we've got one audience member that says that they're going to focus on being the change and embody
Perfect.
that authenticity and engage others to participate. Goes on to say that being an ally is important to them. They want to set a good example for the team. They something that the team can honor and follow their adult to honor and follow their adult children who are amazing. Well, that's
That's
important.
fantastic. You've
Yep.
raised them well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, okay. And again, have their children then become the future allies and follow in their footsteps, which I think is critical. This goes back to, I think that that's so important. It's almost that pay it forward mentality and kind of looking at this life cycle. It's one of the things I love about high tech, right? We're really digging into more of this this idea of from the classroom to the boardroom, and that it really is a life cycle, and those that are being pushed up and pulled up become the individuals that are pushing up and pulling up, and it just keeps creating this chain of reciprocity,
that's right.
and I think that that's so incredibly important.
By the way, you said Pay It Forward. A little sadder movie, but probably one of my top five movies.
Oh, wonderful.
It
Yeah,
really
yeah.
resonates.
Yes, it's been a long time, but it was a phenomenal movie and something that I reference quite
Yeah.
frequently. The other thing I reference quite frequently, but probably doesn't apply here, is Star Wars. Although there is a lot of Jedi knowledge to be had, that probably can apply to allyship.
That's funny.
Um, so
Mhm.
okay, so we've got some questions coming back for us.
Yeah.
All right, so here we go. In a space where agile professionals have been tested and their value magnified, I appreciate the perspective about how agile practices are even more important now. So they're curious to hear how others are doing agile virtually.
Trying to decipher this one just a little bit to see, are we talking about agile in terms of technology agile, right? Or is it
Yeah.
more agile around kind of the way we operate? Maybe
Yeah.
I'll answer it both
let,
ways.
let's make an assumption and let's put it in the context of DNI and operations. What are some of the things that we can do to integrate that agility or that agile mentality virtually?
Yeah, to us, I mean, again, number one, talent is hard to find. We're hiring over 1,000 people a year, and talent is hard to find. So you have to be agile, right? And you
Mhm.
have to be agile, whether it's, again, we talked, there was a previous count about vaccinated, non vaccinated, remote, non remote. Traditionally, believe it or not, we would have liked that most of our employees be either in Milwaukee or New York, where we have the two main campuses.
Yeah.
And we now look around and we say, you know what, we can't do that. We have to be, as an organization, as leaders, we have to be agile. We have to coach ourselves onto how to manage remote teams better than we were doing before. We probably had about 700 people that were remote already. That number is going to increase because at the end of the day, you're looking for good talent. You're looking for talent that can be with you for the journey on whatever you're trying to build or accomplish. So we as leaders have to be agile in our thought process, but also have to learn, in a sense, practicing what we talked about earlier about allowing that balance for our remote employees to have that work-life balance, but also in managing and monitoring the outcomes associated with our employees. So what we focus on is you can be anywhere in the United States. Here are
Mhm.
the outcomes that I'm expecting from you, right? And work with your manager, work with your teams, drive your teams, depending where you are in the organizations. But as long as the outcomes are being delivered, Yamila, we're having our second best year ever. And that was during the pandemic and in 2021.
That's
And
wonderful. Yeah, And again, this goes back to something that you said really struck me. You talked about, the for the folks that are remote, as long as they're accomplishing their tasks, their goals, etc., um, and that the outcomes are there. That's really what's important. Regarding, it's not about the location.
That's right.
It's about the output. And this goes back to, I think, something that's really important when we're talking about like agility virtually, and um, even in person, right? Is understanding what your common objectives and goals are. And I think that as leaders, we need to be really transparent and continue to reiterate what those common goals are, what those objectives are, how our roles and our team's roles go back to that vision and mission that we have. And I think that that's so critical, and is a big part of propelling agility.
And you have to continue to listen and learn along the way. Again, right? That's a continuous process of
Yeah.
truly the word agile. You have to continue driving and listening.
Yeah. So we got one other question. I think we talked a little bit about this, previously, and this is something that's near and dear to my heart as well. Again, I'm also a fully remote employee, and have been a fully remote leader well before the pandemic.
Mhm.
So for this audience member who also is fully remote and was remote before the pandemic, they've gained this appreciation now that the rest of the workforce that hadn't had to work remote previously now has a much better appreciation for what it means to work remote. Probably that intentionality that comes with working remotely. So, how do we continue to um, enforce and drive these good practices that will continue to allow for an even playing field, and that sense of inclusion
Mhm.
once people start to return back into the office? Because it's going to be hybrid from here on in. So the thought process has to be slightly different.
Yeah, so a couple of things and more practical, I would say. One is you're right. I mean, we're probably going to take the approach of 3 days in, 2 days out, work remote whenever you can, right? We're not the first or last organization to do that.
Hmm.
I would say for hybrid meetings are really hard. Being in person and then forgetting that there's somebody else, 4 or 5 other team members on the screen that are trying to jump in, they're trying to say something. Here it's a little bit easier. You can see me raising your hand, but if we're looking across each other at a table and the screen is on, kind of the other side, oh, that's right, Yamila has a question. Hold on, everybody, wait. So you have to be very disciplined in your meetings to ensure that you're accounting for the team members that are on Zoom or Google Meet or whatever it may be, right?
Yeah.
And also, there's kind of the start of the meeting. When you come in, people who are walking in, hey, I'm sorry, a few minutes late. Well, if you're responsible for the meeting and you haven't opened up that Zoom call, right, people are still waiting. So you have to respect, it's not all about you.
Yeah.
And you have to respect that there are others around the team that are showing up on time on Zoom or in the meeting. And you have to really make a conscious effort. So very quickly, I try and end my meetings 5 minutes before the hour. If it's an hour meeting, I'll try and do it in 55 minutes. That gives me breathing room if I'm working remote, that I can go get a glass of water, come back, start my next meeting. If I'm between meetings, I'm in the office now, I can walk at least to my next conference room, whatever it may be. So find that balance between the two.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm conscious that we probably have about 1 minute left here, or 30 seconds
30
left.
seconds.
Souheil, I'll let you leave us with with closing remarks. And while we're doing that, I just want to thank all of our audience members for being here, and for joining us in this session today.
All right, rapid fire. First of all, thank you, Yamila. Thanks to you and the team. Great conversation. So here are my takeaways. Be a passionate advocate, not just a passive supporter from the sidelines. Remember to lead from the front. Take actionable steps to be allies to our female colleagues, our people of color, whoever it may be. But when it comes to empowering others, advocacy is not just the other person's responsibility alone, especially not the women's responsibility alone. It's a two-way street. Be relentless in your pursuit of being an ally. And over time and with concerted effort and discipline, we can truly make a difference and build a more diverse, inclusive, and successful environment for all of us. Push for systemic change to improve the gender gap. And remember, it's a journey. With that, I really thank you for your time. It's been an honor to be here with you today.
Thank you so much, Souheil. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, High Tech, for hosting this and making this possible, and to our sponsors at Google as well, our partners. So thank you, everyone. And with that, we will turn it over to the powers that be to probably take you to the next session or a mental break.